Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we're going to talk about the phrases kochira, sochira, and achira, translated into English this way and that way. So the words kochira, sochira, and achira are used as words of direction basically, in that they kind of mean here or there, or as I said in the beginning, this way or that way. But this is where the distinction between English and Japanese nuance comes in. When we're talking about direction in the Japanese language, it's not so much as simply meaning direction in the kind of mathematical, geographical sense, I guess, but they also represent entities in that here can mean me, as in my being in this direction, and there can mean your direction, your being, your entity. So an example of that is the really common Japanese phrase kochira koso, and this is used as a response when someone is kind of apologizing to you or flattering you, and you say kochira koso, in which kochira koso literally translates to this way or here or whatever. Basically what this means as a response is that you're saying that you should be the one who should be apologizing or being really thankful to the person who is saying the apology to you. So it's basically saying, no, I'm the one who should be sorry, or I'm the one who should be thanking you. And that's really weird given the literal definition that we just gave for these set of phrases, in that we were to think that they just meant directions, like over there or over here. Why would we be using just the word flat out as to mean no, thank you, something like that? Well, there's not really a logical reasoning for it. It's just something that you have to accept as a kind of cultural difference, but it should be easy to pick on because it's so ingrained into the Japanese language. Kochira, sochira, and achira are commonly used as polite ways to refer to people, and in that sense it's for the most part inappropriate to use these terms to refer to yourself because of the implicit politeness. The structure of the Japanese language is arranged in such a way that you are to show politeness to others, but if you use that same politeness upon yourself, it can be really insulting to the people around you or everybody besides you. But we won't delve into that in this video. And as you can see, the earlier example of kochira koso is kind of an exception to this rule, just because it has a nuance of politeness in it already, even though you're referring to yourself as kochira basically, which is in line with what I just said, kind of impolite. So before we go into the examples, I'll just do a quick explanation of the difference between kochira, sochira, and achira. As you go along learning the Japanese language, you'll notice that the pattern of ko, so, and a aren't only in these three phrases. They're reoccurring, for example, in the three phrases koko, soko, and asoko. We can see that there's the ko, so, and a in that set of phrases as well. So what do they mean? When you're using ko, it basically denotes that the entity that you're talking about is in the presence of you, the speaker, and not so much in the presence of the addressee. So you're using ko in the sense of here, as in over here is something. When you're using so, the entity is usually denoted as being in the presence of the addressee and not in your presence, the speaker, and you're using so in the sense of that. When you're using the a, such as achira or asoko, it's usually denoted that the entity that you're talking about is away from both you, the speaker, and away from your addressee, so it's kind of in its own space. And in that case, it's also translated in English technically as that, because in the English language we don't have the distinction of that being far away from you and being far away from both you and your addressee. In the Japanese language it has that extra nuance, so a is something that is away from both of your spaces basically. So all of that may have sounded a bit too conceptual. Let's try to get a hang of it with the example sentences. In our first example that we're about to do, we're going to use kochira as referring to another person, but even though it's another person, that person is in your space, but the person is also unknown to your addressee, which makes him not in the space of your addressee, so it belongs to your space basically. So for our first example, we have the really simple sentence, こちらはジョージ・ワシントンです。So this sentence is literally saying, this is George Washington, and the context, of course, as you may have picked on already, is that you are introducing this person, George Washington, to somebody who doesn't know George Washington. So you should be able to see the dynamic at play here. You are acquainted with George Washington, which makes him a part of your presence, I guess, and he's not a part of the presence of your addressee because the addressee has not met George Washington before. So in that sense, George Washington is an entity that is close to you but not close to your addressee, which is why we're using the kochira. So if we break down the sentence bit by bit, we start off with kochira, which is kind of this way or here, however you want to kind of perceive it. Just have that same meaning or connotation, that would be best. We have the topic marker wa, which is marking kochira as the topic, so this way is, then we have George Washington, that is the name of the person, and then we have desu to end the sentence, so this way is George Washington, basically is what the sentence is saying. Of course, when we translate that into English, it's just more natural to word it as this is George Washington, but of course it's important to notice the process in which we change these aspects of the sentence and the diction because of the cultural difference, and hopefully that gave an idea of it. So kochira wa George Washington desu is this is George Washington. For our next example, we have the sentence Achira wa donata desu ka. So if we break the sentence down bit by bit, we have Achira, which is going to be translated into over there for this sentence. We have wa, which is the topic marker. We have donata, which is the interrogative word for people that is respectful. If this was casual, we would have used the word dare instead of donata, but in this case we're being formal. And following donata is the word desu ka, and desu is ending the sentence, and the ka after that is turning the sentence into a question. So altogether, achira wa donata desu ka is translated into who is that over there, basically. And what you should notice is that in this sentence, we do have a kind of contradiction to the concept that I denoted in the previous example. In this example, it's more likely than not that the addressee knows who the person over there is. That's why I'm asking him who that is, because I think he knows. But the in achira is supposed to denote that the entity is far away from both the speaker and the addressee, which might lead you to think that even the addressee isn't supposed to know. But in this case, achira is working more spatially than conceptually. So in this case, it is quite literally direction, in that the person over there is far away from both me and the addressee that I'm talking to in terms of space. So we're using achira in that sense. And then if the addressee were to answer my question, he might say something along the lines of Achira wa George Washington ni desuyo. And what does that translate to? It's basically saying that's George Washington too. Two as in the letter two, not two as in as well. So yeah, we can see that the person is also using achira because George Washington too is still far away from both of us. So we can't use kochira because he's not in our presence. And yeah, don't think there's much more to explain about that. Hopefully it was clear cut through the examples. Kochira, Sochira, and Achira as this way for Kochira and that way for Sochira and Achira. One final really important thing to note here is that, as I said earlier, these words are used to refer to people in a polite way, so we don't use these to refer to like that pencil or that eraser or that car. We have a different set of words for that. Those are typically used with the words kono, sono, and ano, and we will go through those in a future video, so look forward to that and stay tuned.